I work at a haunted prison in Manitoba, but the strange rules may be the least of my fears. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a chill crept down my spine, clawing at my insides. I thought I was just going about my mundane routine, but then there was a whisper. It was soft, like a secret shared between shadows. The dim corridor stretched out in front of me, its peeling walls soaked in darkness. The air reeked of dampness and despair. I usually found comfort in the prison's routine, the predictable shuffle of feet on cold concrete. But that day, something felt wrong. My heart raced as I stepped closer to the door I shouldn't have touched. It creaked softly, as if the prison itself was warning me to back off. The flickering overhead lights cast grotesque shapes on the walls. Shadows danced, teasing the edges of my vision. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the silence. I jumped, my breath hitching in my throat. I hurried back to my desk, trying to convince myself it was just the wind. But the air was too still, too thick. My fingers trembled as I picked up my pen, the metal cold against my flesh. I strained to catch any sound, any explanation, but the only thing I could hear was my own heartbeat thumping like a warning drum. Then came the noises. A soft tapping, rhythmic and deliberate. It came from the locked cells, each one hiding secrets more twisted than the last. My skin prickled with unease. I glanced around, the other guards seemed oblivious. Was I the only one hearing this? My fears grew like shadows, lurking just out of sight. That I took a deep breath, swallowing the dread that was building in my chest. I forced myself to stay calm. Just as I was about to step back into that corridor, I heard an unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. My breath caught, eyes darting around the empty room. But I was alone. Or was I? Panic surged through me, setting my senses alight. I could feel the presence, lurking just beyond my line of sight. The cold crept up my spine again, more pronounced this time, wrapping around my throat like a vice. I couldn't shake the feeling that something watched me, something hungry for my fear. The air buzzed with tension, a storm brewing just beneath the surface, and then silence. It was deafening. I stood frozen, straining to hear anything at all. But nothing came. Only the oppressive weight of darkness enveloped me. Was this how it ended? I swallowed hard, preparing to retake control, but as I reached for the doorknob, it rattled violently. My heart stopped. A figure loomed just behind the glass, faint in the flickering light. I couldn't quite make it out, a shadow among shadows. Panic exploded in my chest, and I stumbled back, my scream caught in my throat. The door slammed shut hard enough to rattle my bones. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I stood there, frozen in place, instincts screaming at me to run. The metallic tang of fear clung to my tongue, and the oppressive weight of the air pressed down harder, squeezing every hint of rational thought from my mind. Somewhere behind that door, something stirred. The quiet was pregnant with malice, a shroud thickening around me as if the prison itself sought to envelop me in its suffering. That I could still feel the pulse of the shadow on the other side, a dark silhouette that danced against the glass. It didn't move as I caught my breath, a grotesque statue poised in a moment of anticipation. Every instinct told me to flee, but an invisible tether held me in place, as if I were a moth drawn to a flame. Then, in the silence, came another sound, a low, disembodied chuckle that reverberated through the concrete walls. It was chilling, echoing with a manic glee that seemed to rise from the depths of the prison's past. The laughter of the damned. I stumbled back, colliding with the cluttered desk, my heart racing faster, fear shooting through my veins like ice water. I shot a glance at the other guards, hoping one might have noticed something, anything. Their faces were expressionless, absorbed in their own mundane tasks, unaware of the horror lurking just a few feet away. The hollowness of their apathy filled me with dread. Was this place truly a prison, or was it a sanctuary for the restless? Wrenching my gaze back to the door, I lifted my hand again, but this time my fingers trembled as they brushed against the cold doorknob. I hesitated, knowing it was a mistake. But what awaited me beyond the door seemed even more dangerous than the squeezing void of ignorance I had been enduring. As if responding to my turmoil, the doorknob twisted beneath my grasp, almost as if the entity on the other side was coaxing me to open it. I recoiled, my mind racing with every horror story I'd ever heard about the prison. Legends of voices trapped forever in cell blocks, of dark rituals performed to escape the wrath of the violent past. Just then, an excruciating screech filled the corridor, a cacophony that ripped through the air and shook the walls. I flinched back, almost losing my balance, the screech clawing at my sanity. The figure behind the door shifted, as if responding to the noise, a shiver running through its form. I could feel its gaze, pressing into my flesh, and for an instant, I thought I could make out a face, twisted in torment and hunger. I dashed back, my breath coming in shallow gulps, trying to shake the vision from my mind. The laughter echoed again, richer now, dripping with malice and glee, sending shards of ice dancing over my skin. I turned to bolt back to the safety of the guard station, but the lights flickered and dimmed, plunging me into a night thicker than the absence of sound, and then it happened, the door lurched open without a sound. My heart lurched in my chest. The corridor beyond yawned dark and inviting, the figure entirely gone. An invitation to step forward, an unholy allure that tantalized the line between curiosity and dread. I stood at the threshold, a choice to make, a path unfolding stitched with horrors yet unseen. With every heartbeat, the silence thickened, choking, and I could feel the entity, the sinister force, beckoning me to take the first step. "You want answers," it seemed to whisper through the walls, "but the truth is far worse than you can imagine." Before I could gather enough courage to step back, something pulled at my ankle, cold like ice. My knees buckled, and I fell to the ground. As my eyes swallowed the darkness, a pair of spectral hands withered, skeletal gripped my leg, pulling me down into the void. The laughter escalated, echoing a chorus of many, drowning me in a cacophony of despair. I screamed, but my voice was lost. My heart thundered as I was yanked deeper into the abyss, the world above slipping away. And then I saw them. Faces emerging from the dark, their eyes hollow and pleading, mouths stretched in a silent scream, whispers rising around me, a symphony of torment that promised to reveal the secrets of the prison. "Welcome," they gasped in unison, "to the truth." Just as darkness closed completely around me, I felt their cold breath on my cheek, and one whisper rose above the others, chilling me to my core, "You're one of us now." The last remaining light flickered out, leaving me engulfed in blackness. As I struggled against the grip pulling me down, the world above vanished completely, and the haunting laughter echoed in my ears. And then, silence. My senses returned in a jolt, and I gasped for air, the icy grip of the hands releasing me, leaving only a tingling sensation that mirrored the aftereffects of a nightmare too vivid to forget. I found myself lying on cold, unyielding ground, a stark contrast to the smooth concrete of the prison hallways. The air was thick with a musty odor, a blend of rot and despair, and I could barely discern the outlines of rotting walls surrounding me. As I scrambled to my feet, panic surged through me. I was no longer in the corridor I recognized. Instead, I stood in a cramped, damp cell, its windows barred and painted with the shadows of despair. I leaned against the wall to steady myself, the chill from the stone cutting through my uniform, sharp enough to slice through the layers of my reasoning. "Where am I?" I whispered, my voice trembling in the suffocating darkness. The walls seemed to pulse, resonating with secrets too ghastly to comprehend. Wherever I was, I could feel the pulses of countless anguished hearts beating in unison around me. They echoed through the stone, brushing against my mind with echoes of their suffering, begging for recognition. I strained to hear their words. "I didn't deserve it," cried a voice, fragile and broken. "They left me here." Another sobbed, "Please, find me." The chorus of regret and sorrow throbbed continuously, a haunting reminder of lingering souls too terrified to move on. My throat tightened, and I now felt their cold, clammy presence clinging to me, brushing my skin like the caress of a tightly bound nightmare. "Get back!" I yelled into the darkness, realizing that it was futile. The whispers turned to desperate pleas, surrounding me like a suffocating fog. I blinked back tears, my heart wild in my chest as I stumbled forward into the tiny cell. In the corner, a flickering light blinked alarmingly, its glow revealing the remnants of old shackles still embedded in the stone, but amidst the shadows, my chest tightened as realization sunk in. His was a place of torment, and I was intruding into their refuge of despair. "I shouldn't be here," I gasped, my voice barely audible in the oppressive gloom. Suddenly, a sound shattered the mournful symphony, heavy boots stomping, echoing down the corridor just outside the cell. The laughter from before grew louder in the distance, unfurling in the air like smoke, curling into something sinister. My instincts screamed for me to hide, but where? The cell was a tomb, a sealed-off prison within a prison, and I had no means to escape. I pressed myself against the wall, hoping the shadows would swallow me whole. The footsteps drew closer, and as they approached, I caught glimpses of vast shapes looming in the dim light, their presence oppressive. A low growl emanated from the depths of the darkness, and I felt the air grow heavier. "You're one of us now," echoed again through my mind, chilling me to my core. I barely dared to breathe as I listened, my heart a drum in my ears. The door to the cell rasped open, revealing a silhouette backlit by the weak amber glow spilling from the corridor. A hollow laugh escaped, echoing off the stone walls, a mockery of what it meant to be alive. "Welcome to your home," the figure said, its voice like gravel, tearing at the edges of my sanity. As it stepped forward, I could barely make out the glint of eyes, hungry and unyielding, staring into the depths of my soul. The figure seemed to swell, shadows extending from its frame, revealing more eyes dark, hollow, and unblinking. I couldn't help but recoil, and the creeping sense of dread bore down like lead on my chest. It stepped closer, the air vibrating with a palpable energy, and I could see now that its form was made of shadows entwined with the tormented faces of those lost within these walls, their mouths twisted in a silent scream. "Join us," it beckoned, stretching out an anguished hand, fingers long and matted like the roots of a dying tree. "Stay forever." A flicker of primal fear ignited within me. This was not a welcome. It was a warning wrapped in the guise of a cruel invitation. I turned. My own voice a mere whisper against the darkness. "No. I won't be one of you." In that moment, when I swore I could feel the temperature drop, the cell walls began to tremble, shifting as if alive, sinking toward me like an inescapable maw. Panic surged through me again, thawing my limbs as I pushed myself toward the exit, but the weight of doom bore down heavily on me, smothering my every thought, and just as I thought I'd found hope in the fraying edges of the doorway, a piercing scream erupted from behind me, freezing my blood in my veins. "Don't leave me." It was a child's voice, filled with anguish and despair, the cry of a soul shackled by sorrow. The door slammed shut, the darkness closing in around me like a cage that I spun around, desperate to find the source of the voice, but every direction morphed into a twisted illusion of horror. "Please," a whisper seemed to curl around me, edging closer, tangible and cold. "Help us." Suddenly, the walls split, and shadows exploded outward, engulfing me, drowning me further in a tide of desolation and madness. I was pulled into an abyss where time lost meaning, caught in a maelstrom of anguished whispers pleading for release. And then I saw her, a small shadow amongst the horrors, barely discernible with hollow eyes wide, dragging chains that had long become part of her frail form. "Help me," she pleaded, reaching out, but I could feel the ropes of darkness wrapping tighter around me, pulling me back, pulling me down. "Help." The final word echoed through the cell as I was ripped away, swallowed by shadows, the child's voice fading into the cacophony of despair just as something cold and slimy coiled around my ankle, yanking me down into a nightmare even deeper than I dared to imagine. My senses dulled as I was dragged deeper into the abyss, the panic of being swallowed whole mingling with the whispers that twisted around me like serpents. I fought against the grip, clawing at the shadows that wound tighter as I was pulled down, the echoing cries of the lost reverberating in my mind until they became a thrumming heartbeat, reverberating through my bones. Help me, the child's voice wailed again, not the delicate plea from before, but now shrill and warped in agony. You have to help me, I screamed back into the void, ready to rage against whatever force was drawing me down. I can't. But even my own voice was devoured by the darkness, leaving me gasping for air, the cold seeping into my skin. There was no ground beneath me, the sensation was akin to drowning flailing in a vacuum, every breath a struggle. Then the darkness shifted. Shapes emerged, amorphous figures teeming with faces twisted in perpetual torment. Their cries rang out in a haunting harmony, a symphony of despair that echoed through the void. Every anguished flash of their spectral faces, their mouths open in silent wails, pierced through me like 1,000 needles, a stinging reminder that I belonged to none of them. I was an outsider, help us they beckoned, stretching out phantom hands, but their fingers were gnarled and grotesque, like the withered limbs of forgotten trees. I recoiled, the weight of suffering pressing against my chest as tears streamed down my face. If only I could reach for the child. If only I could grasp the simplest inkling of hope in this thick, consuming darkness. Suddenly, a blinding light broke through the shadows, illuminating the nightmarish forms around me. I squinted, my breath catching when I saw the Saursea cracked, shimmering mirror floating in the blackness, reflecting glimpses of the world I had left behind. Each flicker showed faces some I recognized, others I didn't, frozen in expressions of horror or glee, caught in moments of pure fear. The twisted phenomena of joy and despair coiled around one another in torturous juxtaposition. The mirror seemed to draw me in, more powerful than any specter, haunting me with the possibility of escape. Look closer, intoned a voice, smooth and sultry like molasses, yet laced with malice. It emerged from the depths of the darkness, a figure materializing dressed in a tattered uniform nearly identical to mine, except for the spectral glow that surrounded it. It's beautiful, isn't it? The figure whispered. Its face was a mask of smooth flesh punctuated by deep-set eyes that glimmered with a malicious light. That mirror shows the freedom you long for, but to take it, you must confront your worst fears and embrace the darkness within. Fear tightened my throat, and I stepped back as shimmers of light collided with the shadows, illuminating terror around me. My memories surged forth, and the sorrowful faces of those I had caused pain rose from the haunting abyss, their mouths contorted in wails of accusation. The child's gaze locked onto mine through the chaos, pleading, beckoning me closer. Stop it. You're lying. I roared at the phantom, but my voice felt feeble, lost in the haze. Are you sure? The figure taunted, gliding toward the mirror where the child's desperate face loomed. What if you're the reason she's here? The reason we all are. Wouldn't you rather give in to despair? A sudden shattering explosion echoed through the void, and the mirror's image erupted into shards, fracturing the darkness around us into a kaleidoscope of anguish. I felt the sharp edges slice into my skin, warm blood pooling at my feet while uncountable shadows writhed closer, hungry and insatiable. Help me. Please. The child's voice resonated, the echoes of her plea twisting in the air like an unshakable curse that clawed at my sanity. I gritted my teeth and willed myself to move, to break free from the shadows wrapping tighter around me. Shut up. I won't be part of this. I want. With a sudden burst of defiance, I threw myself toward the remaining shards of the splintered mirror, reaching for the power it emanated. In the blinding light, I caught a glimpse of my own agonized reflection, eyes wide with fear, the twisted reality behind me closing in like a vice. Everything grew still, and in that stillness, I saw a final vision. I saw myself standing at the precipice of a deeper void, a chasm that threatened to consume even the light. It whispered promises of release in a familiar tone that rang like a bell through my mind, yet I fought against it. But as I reached the heart of the remaining shards, the cacophony erupted again, drowning my thoughts in howls of desperation and rage. The figures charged forward, a throng of shadows and despair surging toward me, and I realized with dawning horror that I was no longer chasing freedom. I was being consumed, and in that final moment, I could almost taste the acrid fear on my tongue as the chasm yanked me in with a monstrous clap of thunder, the child's face fading into the encroaching dark just as my scream echoed through the roiling chaos. Help. The void collapsed into silence, but that silence was a deceptive lull, heavy with the weight of anticipation. I hung in darkness, suspended between despair and memory, my heart racing against the oppressive quiet that enveloped me like a shroud. The echoes of my panic slowly subsided, leaving behind a hollow throb in my mind that pulsed with uncertainty. Gradually, like the stirring of long-buried bones, shapes began to coalesce around me. I was no longer falling, I was standing in what seemed to be the remnants of a decrepit structure, the air thick with the smell of damp decay and something metallic blood, perhaps. The once glistening shards of the mirror littered my surroundings like fallen stars, each piece reflecting moments of torment that clawed at my reality. "Welcome back," the sultry voice echoed again, now reverberating against crumbling brick walls. I turned slowly, hesitant, my eyes adjusting to the dimness. Before me stood the figure from before, its smile wide and cruel, the shadows coiling around it like tendrils of smoke. "You thought escaping was as simple as shattering glass? No, dear, this is merely the beginning." With a swift motion, the figure unfurled its arm, revealing a gaping black portal against the wall that twinkled with whispers, voices that begged and cried, their longing palpable. "That is your way out if you dare to reach for it." Instinct screamed for me to back away, but I felt the pull of curiosity clawing at my gut, forcing me to step closer. Thrusting my arm toward the darkness within, I hesitated. Each wail was a single thread, weaving together the stories of the lost, the remorseful, the tormented. I swallowed hard, aware that there was no more running, yet every instinct urged me to flee. "What will you do, little soul?" The figure laughed, a sound like shattered glass. "Will you confront those you've wronged? Or will you remain here, feeding the shadows that crave your despair?" In the dark depths of the portal, shadows danced and morphed into fleeting images, scenes from my past interspersed with bitter memories. Friends, lost in tragic accidents, strangers, lives forever altered by my inaction, faces I recognized, shame painted upon their features. The weight of my choices hung heavy, each glance pulling me toward the edge of madness. "Help me." The child's voice reverberated again, breaking through the layers of horror like a beacon. I spun around, searching for its source but finding only the figure, now grinning wider, its teeth sharp and glistening. "Here it comes," it cooed, and with that, the temperature plunged, an unnatural chill clawing up through my bones as the air crackled with an unseen electricity. The shadows began to ripple, seeping toward me like ice-cold tendrils, and I staggered backward, instinctively reaching for the edge of the now crumbling wall. That I was not alone. As the shadows swelled, the faces of the lost emerged from the portal, their features contorted in agony, stretching out hollow hands toward me, fingers trembling as if reaching for salvation. "Help us," they whispered in unison, their voices overlapping like a ghostly choir filled with despair. The figure stood back, arms crossed, observing with delight as I swayed under their haunting refrain. I felt a surge of anger swallow me whole. "No. You can't have me. I refuse to be part of this torment." I shouted, my voice a trembling defiance, yet my heart raced with fear. The whispers turned to screams, amplifying in volume until an unbearable cacophony pierced my ears. I clasped my hands over my head, but the sound burrowed deeper, echoing through my mind, whipping my resolve into a storm of uncertainty. Suddenly, from the depths of the writhing shadows, I caught a glimmer of light, a fleeting flash that resembled the child's face. "Please, help me," it implored, framed by darkness. I was desperate to escape. I reached toward the portal instinctively, the magnetic pull undeniable. I could almost grasp it, but a cold force seized my wrist, wrenching me away from the staggering hope. The figure stood beside me now, its breath foul and rancid. "Do not abandon your sorrow so easily," it hissed. "Embrace it. You carry the darkness within you, but it can be a powerful ally." Before I could reply, the ground began to tremble violently beneath us, rumbling like a storm brewing far below. The shadows screeched as the walls of the decrepit structure cracked, splintering under the pressure as the visions swirled faster, memories of loss, guilt, and despair rising to the surface like a sickening tide. I felt myself slipping again, teetering on the edge of something far more dangerous than I could comprehend. The figure leaned closer, its eyes glinting with malevolence. "Make your choice, dear. Will you join the lost ones forever? Or will you leap into the void and become one with the darkness?" I can grant you power to silence their cries." Before I could articulate my response, the ground heaved with a terrible force, threatening to swallow me whole. I felt my heart race as the walls crumbled, and with a bone-chilling scream, I came face to face with the darkness again, feeling its icy grip on my throat drawing me down deeper, and then, just as I was about to lose myself to the void, the child's voice broke through the din, sharper than all the other cries. "Help me! You can save me!" As everything cascaded around me, I had only seconds to decide. Gripped by fear yet fueled by adrenaline, I lunged for the portal, reaching past the shadows, my hand brushing against something cold and solid, a cruel reminder of what I'd already sacrificed. As I grasped desperately for the child's outstretched hand, the bond of everything shattered, darkness swirling as I began to slip into the depths unknown. The last thing I heard before everything went black was the chilling laughter of the figure echoing behind me, promising that the true horror was yet to come. And then, I was gone. The void faded at last, but it did not release me from its grasp. Instead, I found myself disoriented, sprawled on the cracked concrete floor of what seemed to be a long-abandoned cell. My breath came in quick, shallow gasps as I blinked against the pulsating darkness, trying to reclaim my bearings. The walls dripped with moisture, the air stale and cloying. In the corner, shadows lingered, coiling like serpents eager to strike. The prison was a monument to neglect, its walls peeling and crumbling, a hollow shell that had witnessed unspeakable horrors. I shifted, the rough floor scraping against my palms, and a flash of something caught my eye. A flickering light shone intermittently from down the corridor, illuminating the way forward. Against my instinct, I felt the pull of curiosity again, drawing me to the source. As I forced myself to stand, the air grew thick with a heaviness that clung to my skin. Echoes of distant sobbing sent shivers down my spine, reverberating off the cold metal bars of the cells lining the corridors. I recoiled slightly, realizing that the cries were achingly familiar, lost children, desperate faces, haunting pleas for help. The more I listened, the more I felt the memories of my past choices clawing back to the surface. How many had I abandoned? How many had I failed? Shaking off the dread, I moved toward the flickering light, its waver hinting at something more than an electrical malfunction. As I approached, a figure emerged from the flicker, a woman, ghostly thin, her eyes hollow and dark, her presence fluctuating like the light that surrounded her. "Help us," she intoned, her voice a distant echo that seemed to provoke the very air itself. "You carry our burdens, can you not feel them?" Before I could respond, the shadows around her thickened, tendrils weaving together like vines, contorting her form. I took a step back, heart racing. "What do you mean?" My desperation bled into confusion. I needed answers, but all I gleaned was an overwhelming sense of dread. "They'll come for you," she whispered, the shadows wrapping tighter around her, squeezing out the last semblances of hope from her form. "Do not let them in." Suddenly, the lights burst out in a blaze of brightness, drowning the dark spectre in an unrelenting glow. Screams enveloped me, rising in a crescendo, rising from beneath the rotting floorboards with a deafening fury. I clenched my ears in a futile attempt to block out the sound, fear washing over me in waves. A clunk reverberated behind me, drawing my attention. One of the cell doors, rusted and rotting, began to swing open. A grating screech filled the air, and from within, shadows spilled forth, slinking out like dark ink spreading on paper. They were humanoid in shape but twisted, each distorted figure adorned with fragments of memories, ghostly figures of those I had let down, twisted in agony. A chill slithered down my spine as one of the figures reached toward me, a grotesque mimicry of a child's face forming in the darkness. "You could have saved us," it wheezed, and my stomach lurched at the familiar tone, the echo of the lost child pleading for escape. "You let us down." No. I screamed, staggering backward, but the shadows moved, relentless, closing in on me with every syllable carving another dagger in my heart. I pounded against the wall, my breath quickening, the weight of their anguish pressing in. Suddenly, the inhuman figures paused, jerking at an unseen tether, as if something held them back. I turned to see the flickering light again, pulsating more violently than before. The woman was gone, but the shadows hesitated, caught in the glare. With desperate resolve, I bolted for the light, hoping to seek refuge from my tormentors. Each step felt like a weight, as if the prison's very foundations were warning me away, but behind me, the echoing wails of the shadows bore down on my back like a relentless tide. As I neared the light, its warmth washed over me, chasing away some of the darkness momentarily. But then, the flickering dimmed again, and the wall beside it shattered, collapsing in upon itself and revealing a blackened corridor lined with fading portraits of those once imprisoned here. Their eyes stared into my soul, empty and accusing. That I faltered, the shadows from the corridor crawling toward me once more. I felt myself drawn back as icy fingers grasped my leg, and I realized the horrifying truth: the darkness wasn't merely a collection of lost souls, they were parts of me, reflections of my own guilt and cowardice. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted, and the once stable ground shuddered violently, swallowing the flickering light into darkness. I could see glittering fragments spin through the air, mirror shards scattering like rain, each one a memory, a moment, a choice crumbling away. Choose, little soul. The figure's voice crept back into the silence, a haunting whisper echoing through the chaos. Renew your anguish or let it consume you. You cannot escape this place without a penance. Panic surged through me, and I turned just as the shadows lunged forward. Just before they could ensnare me completely, the memories within the mirrors began to swirl around us, merging into a strange, glowing fog that brightened momentarily, and just like that, I saw her again, the child, her tiny face framed by darkness, mouth forming the words "help me." Before the fog swallowed her whole, the horrors of this prison suddenly crystallized in my mind, and I faced the chaos, heart racing, ready to confront whatever lay ahead, but the shadows grew bolder, exploding forth with a furious darkness that drowned the echoes of hope, and then, everything went black. I woke up gasping, my mind desperately clawing at the remnants of the nightmare that clung to me like a shroud. The air was still thick and oppressive, and the familiar sense of damp stone and decay wrapped around me, grounding me in the reality I both dreaded and could not escape. I felt the coldness of the ground beneath me, but to my surprise, the prison was quiet now. Silently, I raised my trembling hands, still haunted by the sensation of fingers icy as death upon my skin. Instinctively, I pushed myself upright, my heart pounding in a frenzied rhythm as I scanned my surroundings. The corridor stretched out before me, endless and dark, a menacing descent into the unknown. But where were the shadows? The echoes of tortured souls had faded, leaving behind an eerie tranquility that felt more sinister than the cacophony of suffering. As I stood there, uncertainty gnawed at my insides like a ravenous creature. My heartbeat thudded in my ears, blending with the silence, amplifying the oppressive sense of being watched. Then, abruptly, my gaze caught a glimmer at the far end of the corridor. Squinting, I discerned what looked to be an open door, a slice of luminous light seeping through the widening gap, beckoning me closer. I hesitated. The flicker of warmth reminded me of those fleeting moments of hope that had been snatched away too quickly before. Yet, it felt like a lifeline, a chance to escape the darkness that had enveloped me. Fortune-tellers warned against temptation, but sanity was nothing without a spark of hope. Striding towards the light, I felt the shadows slither away, retreating like a tide pulled back into the depths of the ocean, but I knew they would return. The closer I got to the door, the more a sense of urgency flooded me. My footsteps echoed off the walls, reverberating in the hollow corridor. I pressed my palm against the cold metal of the door, adrenaline coursing through me. The moment I pushed it open, I was met with an expansive room, walls adorned with peeling wallpaper and unnatural joviality, dotted with faded flowers, like a twisted reflection of long-gone life. Then, I saw them. In the center of the room stood a group of occupants, their figures casting elongated shadows across the floor. They were like caricatures of joy, staged in a silenced world, their faces locked in frozen smiles even as their eyes betrayed the horror within. Monstrous figures of puppetry, each holding the strings of their own despair. These were no ordinary ambers of light in the darkness, they were once vibrant souls trapped in a dance of torment, abandoned to relive their final moments. I took a step back, heart racing as I recognized one of the figures, a mother, her expression brittle with the weight of grief. Clenching a tattered doll. "Help us," she murmured, her voice a haunting chorus among them, echoing through the room like a wind chime in a storm. "We are trapped here, you must set us free." The others echoed her, chanting and swaying in a choreographed performance of their agony, their spectral shapes straining against invisible strings. "Why me?" I croaked, my voice barely able to breach the heavy air between us. The moment I spoke, the puppet-like figures paused, their gazes shifting toward me, hollow yet accusatory. Their mouths twisted in unnatural ways, whispering secrets that clawed at the edges of my sanity. The choice belongs to you, a voice boomed from behind the mother, resonating through the hollow space. I spun around, but found myself enveloped in a surge of cold air, spewing from the portal behind meth door I had just crossed through was now sealed shut, lined with dark, glimmering energy. No. Panic surged within me as I felt the walls begin to close in, the shadows creeping back into the chamber, coiling around the figures like a serpent preparing to strike. One by one, they began to writhe and twist, their limbs stuttering, creating a grotesque display. I was trapped in their nightmare, an unwilling participant in their tortured ballet. Choose us. They chorused, their eyes glistening with despair. The air grew thick with their collective sorrow. Tentacles of darkness stretched from the walls, entangling me as they scrawled memories across my skin, painting every regret and failure in vivid terror. It's your debt to pay that I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by a darkness that pulsed with their pain. I can't. I screamed, my voice a broken whimper against their suffocating wills. I didn't mean to, but before I could finish, the shadows lunged at me, the weight of countless souls pressing down, squeezing the breath from my lungs. Their whispers morphed into howls, deafening and endless, drowning me in a sea of their unspoken pleas that I covered my ears, shaking my head violently as they encroached upon me, wrath and longing tearing at my spirit. And then, through the chaos, a single shrill scream shattered the void, a child's voice, familiar yet painful, calling my name with an anguish that resonated in my very core. Help me, please. In an instant, the darkness reeled back, leaving me gasping on the floor. I looked up, terror rising in my throat as I beheld a figure emerging through the flickering veil of shadows, a small girl with hollow eyes filled with both torment and desperate hope, stretching out her tiny hand towards me, and just as my fingers reached out to grasp hers, the shadows returned, spiraling and surging around her. The cries of the imprisoned began again in a haunting crescendo, but I only had eyes for the girl, unable to process the increasing dread overrunning the room. That I lunged forward, but the suffocating darkness yanked her back, dragging her away, her desperate scream echoing in the far recesses of the abyss. I felt the very ground begin to tremble beneath me, the room convulsed in response to the rage of the darkness. As the last vestiges of light dimmed and my world faded to black once more, I was left with an unbearable choice hanging in the air: save her or succumb to the prison's wrath, entwined in an eternal dance of despair. And then, the world went silent. When I regained my senses, the room felt different. The once vibrant wallpaper had washed into a muted gray, peeling away like dead skin. Something vital had been snatched from the air, leaving behind a chilling void that gnawed at my instincts. I clutched the floor, my fingernails digging into the grainy surface, as the echoes of that child's scream ricocheted through my mind, a haunting refrain that threatened to drown me. Struggling to my feet, dread pooled in my stomach. Suddenly, a flicker at the far corner caught my eye. A fresh light, flickering like a dying ember, erupted in the shadows. It pulsed rhythmically, swirling like a contained storm, casting long fingers of illumination across the room, momentarily peeling back the layers of darkness. But as I approached it, the shadows quivered with an unsettling energy, as if aware of the beacon that threatened their dominion. Stay away from it. The voice echoed through the now dimly lit room, shuddering through my bones like the clang of metal chains. I spun around to see the puppets uncoiling from their torturous shapes, their faces twisted with terror. You don't understand, the mother figure gasped, her doll now slumped and lifeless in her grip. That light is a lure. It will not save you, it will orchestrate your demise. Ignoring their warnings, I continued towards the light, desperately wanting to reach out to it, to pull the little girl back from the brink, to erase the memory of her terrified face. The light flickered again, sending forth whispers that almost sounded like calls for salvation. Please. I murmured, torn between fear and desire. I reached my hand towards the glow, and the air became electric, buzzing like an engine revving. The faint luminescence rippled towards me, pulling me into its warm embrace. The shadows cringed away, screaming in echoes that made my heart tremble. Don't listen. The puppets cried out, frantic with urgency. We are bound to this prison. Its magic feeds on despair. You must resist. With a sudden jolt, the light surged, enveloping me in its warmth. I felt a powerful pull, as though my very essence was being woven with the threads of this ethereal energy. I glimpsed fleeting images, the girl's smile, memories of laughter echoing from far away, fleeting moments tucked carefully in the recesses of my mind. But beneath it all was something darker, the pulsing sorrow of the figures around me, their manifestations of joy now grotesque and unrecognizable. Suddenly, reality twisted as the light revealed glimpses beyond the veil, beyond the tainted walls of the room. The sinister breadth of the prison sprawled out, a maze of despair, an infinite realm filled with shadows, each bound to their own tale of wretchedness. Choose. Choose now! Shouted the mother figure, her visage melting into an agonizing mask of urgency. The others echoed her words, their twisted smiles now morphing into twisted frights as they swarmed around me, and then, their collective energies exploded, filling the room with grotesque images of loss and grief, each cry and memory wrapped around me like choking vines. A screaming tide rushed upon me, each voice rising louder until they amalgamated into a symphony of terror. I struggled beneath their weight, my heart pounding wildly as I grappled with the impossible choice before me. In that moment, I felt clarity wash over me, as if the light channeled a truth within. I turned my gaze back to the glowing specter swaying before me. It pulsed in time with the thrumming of my heart, beckoning me still. The faint outline of the girl flitted beyond the light, somewhere between the realms of grief and hope, but as I reached for her, a harrowing scream cut through the air, a chill spiraling down my spine. The girl vanished, swallowed by the void. My heart sank as the shadows cackled their dark triumph, slithering around me like a predator playing with its prey. I am sorry. Please help her. I cried out, desperation clawing at my voice as I was yanked towards the grim spectacle of lost souls. I felt the cold tendrils of despair wrapping tightly around my throat, squeezing until the air was stolen from my lungs. And then, the darkness whispered secrets I'd never wanted to know. You can free her, it cooed, silkily entwined around my senses. But only if you sacrifice your own soul. The room intensified with dread, the flickering light dimmed as the choice loomed larger, pressing in on me from all sides. Just as I felt the decisive weight of the shadows nearing my heart, the flickering light surged once more, bursting forth like a dying star, illuminating their anguished faces in stark clarity. Then I heard it, the soft, heart-wrenching cry of the child echoing through the prison walls, her voice breaking into 1,000 fragments hanging in the oppressive air. But what chilled me to the bone was the second voice that emerged, equally familiar yet dripping with a malice I couldn't comprehend. Let me out, or they will take everything. In that moment, a sinister realization clawed at my mind. As I teetered on the brink of decision, I turned towards the source of that new voice, and in the pulsating light, I caught a glimpse of a figure emerging, someone I thought I had lost, someone who had made a pact with the darkness. And in that heartbeat, everything changed. The flickering light swelled around me, threatening to collapse in on itself as I strained to focus on the shadowy figure manifesting from its depths. At first, it was just a silhouette, indistinct yet horrifyingly familiar, cascading in the light's ethereal glow. But as it emerged further, a sense of recognition seared my consciousness, clawing its way to the front of my mind with blazing clarity. That? My thoughts spiraled into panic. No, it can't be. Yet there she stood, a broken specter of the vibrant woman I once knew, the last soul left tethered to my heart. Her eyes, once bright with laughter, were now hollow voids, mirroring the dark corners of the prison itself. She reached for me, and with every step she took, the atmosphere thickened, the very walls of the room groaning with a pregnant silence. Alice? I barely found my voice, choked by the impossibility of it all. How, do you see them? She whispered, her voice silken yet fractured. The shadows around us began to squirm, writhing with agitation, as though my descent into despair had stirred them from their slumber. I hear them, I replied, sensing the cold brush of their presence around my legs, the whispers slithering around my ankles, trying to pull me down. What have you done? Her laugh sliced through the oppressive atmosphere, chilling my skin. This prison is alive, Eric. It feeds on sorrow, on regret. I thought I could save you, but instead she trailed off, her gaze drifting beyond my shoulder into the gathering vortex of darkness. They want more. I need you to trust me, but you're here with them. I stepped back, fear coiling around my heart as the figures began to swirl, their faces peeling back like rotting fruit, revealing the agony etched into their very souls. That I made a choice, just like you must now, she replied, authority mixed with desperation in her voice. You have to decide, them or me. A cacophony of howls erupted from the shadows, drowning my thoughts. The sorrowful moans twisted into manic laughter, drowning out the echoes of despair that had haunted me since I first entered this hell. The room shifted, the walls pulsating with an urgent hum, as though they were entities yearning for my decision. Choose, Eric. Alice urged, her face softening momentarily before it warped into grotesque agony, echoing the torment around us. Don't let it consume you. Standing on the razor's edge of despair, the duality of my heart roared in conflict, love for the woman I lost warred with the need to save countless others imprisoned in the shadows. I felt a sinister pulling, resonating through the space, as the specters grew more agitated, sensing my hesitation. Just let go, Eric. Alice's voice broke with an urgency that clawed at my heart. What they offer is sweet as honey, but thick with poison. We are not meant to linger here. The tendrils from the shadows wrapped tighter around my limbs, pulling me down, compelling me to join their collective lament. I felt the cold creeping into my lungs as they hissed promises of power and truth, but their sweetened whispers were overshadowed by Alice's pained cries. Please, she begged, her image wavering as tears streamed down her ghostly cheeks. I don't want to be a part of this. You must fight for yourself. For me. Gone was the warm embrace of the light, darkness reigned supreme, trailing like ink across the faded memories of my existence. As the echo of fragmented cries grew more shrill, resonating through my core, I felt something snap within me. In an instant, everything shifted. That I surged against the gnarled chains of shadows, crying out for the salvation I once sought, for the child, for Alice, for all those bound in this wretched place. I refused to be merely a vessel for despair. But as my strength flared, I felt the darkness ripple violently, a flash of anger coursing through its intangible form. Alice's silhouette flickered, wavering like a candle in a storm. You must choose. She screamed once more, her voice merging with the rising crescendo of howls and laughter until they formed a singular roar. In that moment of raw desperation, a horrifying realization panged in my chest. Each breath I took shuddered with the weight of uncountable souls. If I stepped too far into the darkness, it would collapse into itself, taking Alice and every lost spirit with it. But then, the shadows curled, revealing a pair of familiar eyes glimmering through the void. The child's eyes, wide and shimmering like stars, filled with fear and hope. Help! Echoed her voice, mingled with Alice's as I felt the world blur, spiraling into chaos, the choice slamming into my heart with the force of an avalanche. That I took a step forward, drawn again to the light. But as I did, I felt the pull of shadows lurking closer, eager to envelop me forever. I could no longer distinguish between them, my heart hammered painfully within my chest as I exhaled a shaky breath, teetering on the edge of truth and madness, and then everything went quiet. The shrieking voices faded, the shadows stilled like an unseen predator waiting in the darkness. The flickering light flared brighter, its glow revealing something I should have never seen, a doorway, a portal that pulsed with otherworldly energy. That I in a heartbeat, the air thickened again, as if the world held its breath, waiting for my decision. I stood on the precipice, heart racing, eyes fixed on the door. But before I could take another step, an echo surged through the air, sending tremors rippling through the walls. A voice, low and sinister, rumbling like thunder across a stormy sky, leave the light and embrace the darkness or lose everything you hold dear. That I in that moment of chilling clarity, I felt the prison tremble beneath me, as the thin veil of reality began to rip, threatening to unravel the very fabric of my soul. Every revelation sparked a new horror, each choice revealing a darker consequence. I had thought this prison held dark secrets, but it was a theater of shadows, echoing with the lives that had devoured me. Life now intertwined with theirs. The hollow laughter of the lost seeped into my consciousness, demanding I conform, crave the shadows as they began to press in, wrapping tighter around my throat and heart like a vice. The moment hung heavy, my breath caught between panic and realization. There I stood, the darkness whispering sweetly of power, comfort with a cost, while the flickering light offered salvation, yet I knew it beckoned something more profound and terrifying. It promised clarity, yet also the weight of choice that could lead to ruin. What if what if Alice were truth spoken from a facade of hope? The darkness quivered in anticipation, knowing how much I craved acceptance, my blood pounding as the memory of the child's plea echoed within me. The shadows swirled and morphed, revealing the anguish of those lost within their depths, their expression shifting with each flicker of the light. I could see their fingers stretching toward me, pleading yet laced with malevolencia, promise of knowing, of being part of something larger than myself if only I would surrender. You must choose. Alice's voice echoed, a poignant reminder of the ties to a world I could never return to if I succumbed. Yet the shadows surged with their own deadly charm, promising understanding, fulfilling my every dark craving. Join us, they whispered, shifting, sliding closer. You were always meant to be one of us. And then I saw her again, the child, her frame shifting in and out of focus as she stood in that doorway of light. I stepped toward her, my heart thrumming with desperation. "I'll help you," I cried out, fingers reaching in vain, but the shadows latched onto me, dragging me back, intertwining me in their cold embrace. "Choose." Alice screamed again, with a ferocity that rattled through my chest. "Don't let the prison take you." I looked once more at the doorway, the child standing just inside, her expression bewildered yet radiating hope. The essence of the flickering light began to weave through my heart, dispelling the shadows momentarily. I could not succumb, I would not. Not when every breath I took soared above the depths that yearned to consume. "Please!" I shouted, my voice resolute, fists clenched at my sides. "I will not be your puppet," and with that proclamation, a tempest howled through the corridor. The shadows recoiled as I surged forward, but the darkness did not relent. "You will regret your choice." It hissed, and I felt the temperature drop, the surrounding air caving in. With each heartbeat, I willed myself onward to the light, which pulsed with fiery urgency. I reached the threshold, stretching my hand toward the child, our fingers nearly touching, but the darkness lashed back, pulling at my ankles, wrestling against my very will. "No!" I screamed, desperation clawing at my throat. In that moment where horror and revelation converged, I made the most profound choice of my life. I chose the light. I could not allow the depth of my worst fears to swallow my humanity, not while memories of laughter danced in the periphery of consciousness, fading like mist but fiercely alive. Light exploded around me as I barreled toward the child. "I'm coming. I won't let you go." I pushed through the shrieks of despair, the primal howls of the bereaved clawing for my return, my soul's tether snapping, the connection severed with a violent rip. And at last, we touched. I felt a rush, a current of warmth that coursed through my veins, flooding me with life, binding the past and present in an embrace I had long since forgotten. In that instant, the child's face lit up, tears glistening like dew in morning light, as if I had given her breath anew. But with our connection made, I swiftly understood the weight of our bond. The walls of the prison roared, furious and relentless. The shadows began to close in, howling as they twisted towards the now vanishing light. They ground their collective teeth, anger igniting every corner as they clawed toward us with ravenous greed, and then the floor trembled fiercely, the room shook, and the prison walls began to crumble around us. "Run!" I cried, pulling the child toward the portal as fragments of the prison broke apart into endless darkness. With every step, the earth undulated beneath us, still haunted by the threats of loss lurking below. Together we surged toward the portal's radiant embrace, desperate to escape the clutches of decay. "You are mine," echoed the voice of the prison, a final threat piercing through the chaos. "You have awakened us. You cannot flee." The ground collapsed beneath, a terrifying sound crashing like thunder, and I leaped through that ethereal doorway, clutching the child with all the strength I could muster. Suddenly everything went dark. As light broke through, it felt foreign, too bright, too real and cold. I blinked back tears, scrambling to sit up on the soft grass beneath me, a world reborn yet filled with shadows of memory. We had escaped, I had saved the child, but as reality settled back in, I felt something shift inside me. That a chilling realization coursed through my veins. We had breached the prison's hold, yet I could feel it lurking, waiting, whispering in the recesses of my mind. The horror was not over. We may have escaped its haunt, but I understood with raw terror that darkness had crept inside my very essence. The shadows hadn't vanished, they had merely transformed, rooting themselves deep within the fabric of my soul. The prison had not released me. It had merely sewn itself into my being. And as I wrapped my arms around the child, a scream escaped my lips, reverberating in a cacophony of unforeseen terror, the haunting anguish echoing through the quiet night. We're free, but are we? The laughter returned, distant yet close, and now it lingered, a haunting reminder that the darkness would never truly let go. I could hear it whispering to me, plotting in the recess of my mind, waiting for the moment I would inevitably succumb. The last line of my sanity thinned like ice beneath the weight of a never-fading echo as I shuddered at the chilling thought: how could we escape when evil still lingered just beneath the skin?